Hello, welcome. All right, so I am doing the walk of shame right now because I am using or wearing my same outfit sweater as I record these videos. So I'm going to be these videos out while I have some time. So here is something a little different. This came into my mind this morning and just kind of coming across a few videos and conversations with people about following rules, or should there be no rules with the tarot. Actually, I think with a spiritual practice, metaphysical practice, I think the wording should be changed from rules as opposed to guidance. I think the best way to describe working within boundaries and understanding various kinds of decks, various kinds of systems, different kinds of perspectives from the deck creators to authors of books is there's no set rule. There really isn't. We have structure when it comes to the tarot decks. The most popular system globally is the Rider-Waite-Smith. We have the Doff system. We have decks that incorporate Kabbalah, K Kabbalah and Q Kabbalah. The Q Kabbalah is the Hermetic. And so those approaches of the Kabbalah with a K, Judaist Kabbalah, takes a different perspective when it comes to the Tree of Life as opposed to the Hermetic Kabbalah with a Q. So with systems like that, there are rules, I almost have to say, that follow the structure of that particular system, especially with the Tree of Life. You can't really modify the Tree of Life in a great way. You know, you can't change Malkuth and put it on the top and Kether on the bottom. These are structures. This is a system that's thousands of years old, and it's continuously being examined and practiced and studied, passed on for generations. So there is a set, I don't like the word law. There's a set structure that needs to be used when working with a system like that, especially with the tarot. So there are a few decks out there that work with the Kabbalah system, Hermetic, and the Judaic system of the Kabbalah. So I think those are the exceptions because those are traditions, and traditions, especially with something that has such a long history, there are laws, there are rules. I shouldn't say laws, but there are rules that need to be understood and respected when studying something like that. Now, the Doff system is, with the Golden Dawn, it can be loosely interpreted because we have seen decks that are inspired by the Doff system, either by the keywords or by the astrological placements, the artwork, the colors with it. But when you look at the Golden Dawn system and the Doff, there are some differences, but there is some play between the two. So like with the Rider-Waite-Smith, I'm going to just jump a little bit. The Rider-Waite-Smith kind of got siphoned through so many different influences to where it got to where it is currently, like the original Rider-Waite-Smith. There's some reference to Christianity imagery in it, in regards for what's the best way to say this? Like the Pope, the Hierophant, the names that are used, uh, those that card in particular really it doesn't upset people, but it really it's a card that it was posted on Instagram that when it was polled through tarot readers, that it was the least liked card. And I believe it's just because of the way this image of the Hierophant, the Pope, has been represented. And it's been represented in a religious background. You know, it's an actual Pope, bishop. The way that they're dressed, everything seems like there is a structure. There's an order in it, and I feel with a card like that, people don't want to see that. They don't want to see that kind of authority. Um, the Hierophant and the Emperor, okay, they're one after the other. They are two different forms of authority, okay? Some people would see the Hierophant as the spiritual law, the spiritual way that things need to be done, while the Emperor is the leader, is the guide, and what says goes, and it needs to be respected. And the Emperor is more on the external realm, while the Hierophant or the Pope is seen, you know, in conventional religion as someone that we look up to, pastor, cardinal, anyone like that, anyone, archbishop, anyone who has a higher position in religion. And so it's as the Rider-Waite-Smith was originally created, and that deck has gone through massive shape shifting of its archetypes. We're seeing a redesign, a rethinking of that character, of that archetype. And so it's a card not to be feared for. So when it comes to that structure, when it comes to reading the tarot and some of these cards that kind of put us off because it has such a strong authoritative sense to it, these are guides, plain and simple, and that's what the tarot is. The rules that have been applied to the tarot, especially as a new generation comes in and explores the tarot, it's wonderful that you're seeing and experiencing a lot of these newer decks the way that you feel and the way that you see and intuitively how you're connecting. But and I do throw this in to better understand how these images and how they've changed and shape shifted throughout the hundreds of years is you need to go back and look at the traditional early stages, the early creation of various tarot decks, the Marseille, and even playing cards, because that's pretty much the premise as tarot started moving into the divinatory realm, thanks to Levi. And so I think it's Attila, I'm so sorry, Fatilla, who introduced more of a spiritual, intuitive way of looking at the cards and creating a deck specifically for that. The rules, the guidance, I think needs to be understood, but it doesn't have to be followed to the T, with the exception of practices, as I mentioned, of the Kabbalah, where there is a particular system. There are a lot of decks now that are being created by deck creators where they've studied for 10, 20, 30 years the Kabbalah, and putting it in such a way that it's a little bit more easier to understand. A lot of the Kabbalah decks that have come out in the last 10, 20 years that have been simplified, doesn't really go in depth, but it gives you the structure. You see the Tree of Life, and you see the references to the major arcana and to the minor arcana suits based on their elements. And so that you could better understand the relationship of the tarot in relation to the Tree of Life. And that's something that I am slowly going to be exploring. I already have my book, I already have the deck that I'm going to be working with. I'm going to work on it tonight, I hope, to get started a little bit further into it. But yes, rules. There are within reason. But for the most part, consider the decks that you have, and depending on how in-depth your practice is, explore a little bit more, and then you'll start understanding how the deck that you are currently holding, where it came from. There are some decks, unfortunately, that have been created where there really hasn't been much research. It seems just to be a copy and paste of similar imagery. And it's just dolled up with, gilding and iconic graphics and stuff like that. It's just more of a packaging way of promoting these particular decks. And you'll start seeing decks that kind of look a little similar. But I highly recommend for those to explore outside of the realm of popular decks that are out there, and challenge yourself. Maybe go back and be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more constricted with your practice, so you could better understand the history behind these cards and how they came into creation. So the tarot is of guidance, and depending the system that you work with and how you connect with it and how far you want to go with it, you will find rules. There's a way that you have to work with a particular deck with a certain system. But ideally, when you do the interpretation, when you use that particular deck and you do readings, you're gaining that knowledge from that system and you're applying it into your interpretation. So you are getting the knowledge of that deck, but then what comes important is your interpretation, your insight is the wisdom that you've gained by working with that deck. Okay, so there has to be that understanding that once you've worked through a deck that is of a different system, and you feel comfortable reading with it, you do have to follow a certain guideline. But once you've learned it and you've moved with that deck and explored in so many different ways, those rules, in a sense, kind of go out the window because you've already gained that experience. It's like high school, college. You graduate. Some people don't even remember anything from high school. A little bit of college, depending on the career that you're going in. But what's important is how you use that information that you gain, that knowledge, and turning it into wisdom. So that's where I feel the play of understanding rules and guidelines of the tarot, but turning it around and giving your own interpretation, your own understanding, and that's your own unique wisdom. That's your own unique take of working with that particular deck. And you give someone a deck, you give 3 people who are different levels of experience of tarot readers one deck, and someone asks the question, you're more or less going to get different answers because everyone's experience is coming from a different place. And so they would probably apply certain knowledge from a system that they learned that they felt works well with this particular deck, and vice versa. So Um, it's basically the rules become more of the knowledge, the tool, and then how you express it out and how clearly it is understood by people. And that's always changing. Our understanding of reading with the tarot is growing as we grow as individuals. A reading that we may have done a few years ago for ourselves, and a few years forward, we do a reading, we've changed, and the cards are going to pick up on that. And that's showing that growth, that's showing that understanding of working with the tarot and knowing its subtle nuances, and it's obvious, like, this is what's really going on, and respecting it and embracing it and taking it for what it is. Don't question it, because the tarot is a reflection of yourself. So why question something that is clearly coming from within when doing a reading? And that applies to yourself, doing readings for yourself, or for other people. You need to have that confidence when you read for yourself and for other people. If you start questioning any of that, the reading's not going to become clear. And so that's where, I'm not going to say you have to go back to the books, but that's where you may have to take a moment and just reassess where you are with your practice. Maybe go back a few steps. Maybe go back to a deck that may be a little bit more easier to connect with. It could be that particular deck that wasn't the right timing to use for that reading. You know, try another deck to get maybe to fill in the gaps, if you will. So I just thought I'd point this out about rules within the tarot, if there are any. But they're more like guidelines. And again, with the different systems that we have out there for the metaphysical practice and applying it to the tarot, there are structured rules that need to be followed to understand certain systems. But again, it's what you take from it, and you move from that place, and how you express it and how you read it for other people. Okay, so those are my thoughts. Let me know how you feel about this. How do you feel about your practice and having limitations within yourself, challenging yourself with other decks, other approaches in reading the tarot? Do you feel that self-rules, putting limitations on yourself when it comes to practice, is good, or do you feel it could be maybe not giving you the space that you need? So let me know what you think. Okay, so my quick public service announcement, in a sense, for tarot readers. How do you feel about this particular subject of structure and law and rules when it comes to one's practice and incorporating other systems? All right, until next time, I'll probably be wearing the same shirt for one more video, but let me know what you think, your comments, and I will catch you again soon. Thank you so much, everyone.